Lena sat on the narrow sill where the paint had peeled into little white curls, the kind you could scrape off with a fingernail and line up like fallen petals. From here, the street looked longer than it was, a strip of cracked asphalt, 3 neem trees, a postbox that swallowed letters and exhaled nothing. She pressed her forehead to the glass until her breath fogged a pale circle. Every evening at almost the same minute, she did this. It wasn't a ritual at first. It became one when the days decided to repeat themselves. The house carried sounds that didn't belong to her. Pipes ticking, a ceiling fan that wobbled, a clock that announced each second as if it were a stubborn truth. In the kitchen, a single plate waited beside the stove, turned upside down to keep dust away, the way her mother used to do. That plate used to clink against another while they washed dishes together, sleeves rolled, warm water, small jokes. Now it sat like a sealed promise. She held a soft bear by the arm. Its fur had thinned to a gray sheen, but its bead eyes were intact, shiny and too confident. She rested it on her knees and watched the road. A bike passed. A stray dog considered the postbox, changed its mind, and collapsed in a square of sun. The light slid along the floorboards to her toes. She kept them still, as if sudden movement might scare fate away. "Do you need anything from the shop?" the neighbor called from the gate. His voice was gentle, as though speaking into a church. "I'm fine," she said without turning. "Thank you." "Your mother, any word?" She shook her head. He waited a moment, then left with the careful silence of someone retreating from a sleeping child. The gate clicked. A bird pecked at the dust. Somewhere next door, a kettle shrieked and quieted. Her mother's scarf hung from a nail by the door, blue with thin white stitched ladders. It still carried the faint scent of jasmine hair oil, or maybe that was memory performing its little magic. Lena sometimes took the scarf down and held it like a message written in a language she used to speak. The last morning replayed in precise frames, her mother tying that scarf, tucking hair behind her ear, pressing a kiss to Lena's forehead. "I'll be back by evening," she had said, and it was an easy thing to believe. Evening had always happened. It would happen again, and her mother would step into it. That was the shape of a day. Only, evening arrived without footsteps. At first, Lena checked the time, then checked again, convinced the clock had skipped a line. She prepared tea, 2 cups because habits have muscle memory. One cooled untouched. She set it on the table and watched the steam thin into nothing. Night gathered. The bulb in the corridor hummed. She dialed a number and listened to it ring into a space she could not access. By midnight, she gave the second cup to the sink. The clink sounded too loud, like a small betrayal. The next day, she went to school because normalcy is a rope you hold when the ground yawns. She answered questions, lined up for assembly, copied notes with careful letters. At break, she sat alone on the low wall near the jacaranda, watching purple petals shiver. A teacher stopped, eyes kind. "You seem tired," the teacher said. "Everything okay at home?" "She's late," Lena replied. The words felt thin. "Do you want to call someone? An aunt? A friend?" "She'll come," Lena said, and the teacher nodded in that adult way that means I hear you and I am worried. After school, Lena walked home through heat that made the air wobble. She paused outside the sweet shop because the window trays gleamed with syrup and order, and she wanted to stand in front of something that obeyed a recipe. The shopkeeper, a man with a clean apron and tired eyes, noticed her watching. "Kulfi?" he asked. "Not today." "For Mother's Day soon," he said. "We'll decorate." She nodded, unsure if the calendar respected her circumstances. Evenings layered themselves like transparent sheets, and small changes announced themselves like headlines. The plants on the balcony drooped. Mail collected. A stray hair gathered dust against the skirting. Lena started making lists to keep her hands busy. Sweep, water, boil eggs, charge phone, check messages, speak to neighbor, breathe again. She wrote them in a small notebook with a cracked spine. The act of drawing little squares to tick filled time and made time appear manageable. One afternoon, she pulled a chair to the window and told herself she wouldn't stand up until she counted 50 people. Counting was safer than hoping. By 23, the light softened. By 41, a woman in a pink dupatta crossed with a little boy in a superhero shirt. He dragged a car on a string that kept catching, then freeing itself with a triumphant jerk. Lena smiled in spite of herself. 50 arrived with a man balancing a stack of metal tiffins, face shining. She reached the number, but her body didn't believe in chairs anymore. It had started to believe in thresholds. A call came from an unknown number on the third evening. She answered with air caught in her throat. It was a bank advertisement, bright and indifferent. "Are you interested in?" "No," she said, and the polite voice apologized for troubling her and went back to wherever bright voices are kept. That night, a storm scrubbed the sky. The first drop hit the window with a coin sound. Another followed quickly, then many. The power flickered, and the fan slowed, surrendering. Lena lit a candle and shadows multiplied, swinging gently, enormously. She took down the scarf and looped it around her shoulders, nodding it the way she had watched her mother do 1,000 times. The cloth warmed against her neck. She wanted to speak, a full, long sentence about fear and absence, but the room didn't require it. Words would only confirm a fact she kept trying not to admit. A knock came, 3 soft taps. The neighbor again, umbrella dripping. "You should close the window," he said. "The rain will pool." She let him in. He shifted on the mat, not sure whether to step farther. "I can call my sister," he offered. "You could stay the night with her." "It's okay," Lena said. "Thank you." "Do you want me to wait a bit?" he asked, as if his presence might usher someone home. "You have already waited," she said, and he gave a grieved smile and retreated into the rain. She shut the window. The glass rattled in its frame like thin teeth. When the house quieted again, the kind of quiet that presses into the ears, she pulled the notebook close and wrote a date. Beneath it, "Evenings arrive." That is true. Some things arrive without the person you expect. That is also true. She drew a small square and ticked it, not sure which task she had completed, but satisfied by the obedience of ink. Around midnight, the power returned, abrupt and triumphant. The fan resumed its wobble. She placed the candle stub in the drawer and washed the single plate. The cloth squeaked against porcelain. The sound made the room feel cleaned of accusation. She dried her hands on the hanging towel and stood in the doorway, the scarf still around her. The hallway stretched out like a pause. She thought about the last words her mother had said. She examined them like a jeweler examines a stone, turning them under different lights. By evening, the phrase had seemed small then, tossed between breakfast and the bus stop. Now it was a continent. She wanted to be angry at it, but anger needed a target. Words were only tools, and this tool had been used with faith. On the 5th evening, the sky went the color of bruised plums. A flock of starlings tilted as one body. The dog by the postbox lifted its head, considered a gust, and dropped it back down with a sigh. A child 2 houses down practiced a recorder. The notes reached her window like messages folded into air. She raised the sash, let the strange melody in, and whispered to the empty street, "I'm still here." The bear listened with its shiny eyes. A small shape crossed the corner. Cat, shadow, trick of the light, and she held her breath. For a heartbeat, expectation stood in front of her, distinct as a person. It had weight. It had a face. Then it was only air and a branch tapping glass. She closed the window carefully, avoiding the frame's splinter. The room took back her reflection. In it, she looked older by something that didn't have a name. Not years, knowledge, maybe. She slid the chair away, set the bear on the pillow, and laid the scarf across the back of the door where it could keep watch. Before bed, she stood once more at the threshold, one hand on the jamb, like a swimmer gripping the pool edge, gathering breath. "Maybe tomorrow," she said softly, almost as if not to wake anyone. The words didn't beg. They didn't bargain. They rang like the clock, stubborn, exact. She turned off the light. In the dark, the house settled into its midnight shape. Pipes ticked. The fan drew circles. Somewhere outside, a motorbike coughed, failed, Tried again. Succeeded. Lena lay down. Not sleeping yet, not fully awake, balanced in the place where waiting becomes a craft. She knew the window would be there in the morning. She knew the street would carry new faces. She knew the scarf would hold its scent a little less each day. What she didn't know, and clung to anyway, was the sound of footsteps that might return everything to scale. Until then, the sill would keep her, the clock would count, and hope, trimmed to a manageable size, would sit beside her like a companion that refuses to leave. The mornings always began the same way, sunlight creeping past the curtain edge, the hum of the ceiling fan, and the silence that stretched across every room like a heavy sheet. Lena, age, stirred awake with the same thought that had greeted her for days. Maybe today. She brushed her hair quickly, straightened the blanket, and hurried to the window as though her mother might appear at that precise second. But the street offered only ordinary scenes. A milkman clinked bottles into a crate. A boy dragged his school bag along the pavement. The postbox stood red and indifferent. None of it matched the picture she kept replaying in her head, her mother walking down the street with a blue scarf tied around her neck, smiling the smile that always felt like sunlight poured directly into her chest. Breakfast was a half-hearted ritual. She boiled water, dipped bread into tea until it sagged, then left most of it untouched. The chair across from her remained empty, its wood polished by years of her mother's presence. She placed a cup of tea there anyway. It cooled untouched, just as it had the day before. At school, her teacher, Miss Farrell, pulled her aside after class. "You look pale, dear. Has your mother returned yet?" Lena shook her head. Her throat tightened, but she forced the words out. "She will." She promised. The teacher's eyes softened, but her reply carried hesitation. "I hope so. Just know that if you need anything, I'm here." The kindness felt like a bandage on a wound too deep. Lena nodded, unwilling to let her tears spill in front of the class. During lunch, two girls whispered nearby. She caught fragments. "Still waiting, poor thing." Their pity pierced sharper than cruelty. She pressed her sandwich flat, appetite gone. After school, she walked home slowly, dragging her shoes against the dust. At the corner, Mrs. Patel, the neighbor with gray hair tied into a knot, stood watering her plants. "Child, have you heard from your mother?" she asked. "No," Lena answered. Mrs. Patel sighed, water spilling over the pot. "Sometimes adults, they get lost in their troubles. Don't blame yourself." The remark stung. "I'm not blaming myself." She hurried past before the woman could say more. Inside, the house smelled faintly of soap and something absent. The scarf still hung by the door. She touched it once, quickly, then dropped her hand. She couldn't decide if holding onto it comforted her or deepened the wound. She sat at the table and opened her notebook. A fresh page stared back. She wrote, "Day 7. Still waiting." The letters slanted, cramped. She shut the book quickly, as if the words themselves might accuse her of being foolish. Evenings were the hardest. The light faded too quickly, and shadows grew long against the walls. She pulled her chair to the window, scanning each figure who passed. Her heart leapt whenever she saw a woman with dark hair, but the hope always collapsed when they walked by without stopping. One evening, the neighbor's teenage son leaned against the gate, earbuds in, watching her stare through the glass. He removed one earbud. "She's not coming back, you know." The words hit like a slap. "Don't say that." He shrugged. "Everyone's talking about it. If she was coming, she'd be here already." Lena's face burned. She slammed the window shut and pressed her back against the wall, shaking. His voice echoed inside her head. "Not coming back." She bit her lip until the metallic taste of blood filled her mouth. That night, she dreamed of footsteps approaching the door. She ran to open it, heart bursting with relief. But when the door swung wide, only emptiness stared back. She woke gasping, the teddy bear clutched so tightly her fingers ached. The following afternoon, she found a letter slipped under the door. Her hands trembled as she opened it, hoping against hope it was from her mother. Instead, it was a bill, a dull sheet of numbers and dates. Disappointment surged, heavier than the paper itself. She tore it in half and let the pieces scatter across the floor. Miss Farrell visited 2 days later. She brought a small box of cookies. "I thought you could use some company," she said gently. "Lena, let her in." The teacher glanced around the quiet house, the single cup on the table, the scarf by the door. Her expression grew heavy, though she tried to smile. They sat together in the kitchen. "You're very strong," Miss Farrell said. "I'm not," Lena muttered. I keep waiting." "That takes strength too," the teacher replied, pushing the box toward her. The cookies were sweet, but they crumbled dryly in her mouth. She wanted to believe the teacher's words, but strength felt like something distant, reserved for people who didn't feel hollow inside. After Miss Farrell left, Lena walked into her mother's room. The bed was made, the pillow indented slightly from old sleep. On the dresser sat a comb with strands of hair still caught between its teeth. She picked it up, pressed it to her cheek, and inhaled the faint trace of jasmine. Her chest ached with a longing too large for her small body. She whispered to the empty room, "Why did you go? Didn't you know I'd be waiting?" Her voice echoed back, thin and useless. In the days that followed, she noticed how others began to look at her differently. At the market, whispers trailed behind her. In class, silence followed whenever she entered. She hated being the girl who waited, the girl whose mother had left. One afternoon, she overheard two adults near the postbox. "Poor child," one said. "It's been weeks. That woman's not coming back." Lena froze, her hands gripping the railing. The words clanged through her head, relentless. "Not coming back. Not coming back." She ran home, slammed the door, and pressed her palms against her ears. "She will," she whispered to herself. "She will." But the echo of the strangers' voices lingered, louder than her own. That night, she sat by the window, tears sliding silently down her face. Each passing shadow teased her with possibility, each disappointment heavier than the last. Finally, she pulled the scarf down from its nail and wrapped it tightly around her shoulders. "Please," she whispered into the fabric. "Please come back." The scarf carried no reply. Only the clock in the hallway answered, ticking into the silence. And for the first time, a seed of doubt lodged in her chest, small, sharp, and impossible to ignore. The storm had passed, but the sky still held the gray color of ash. Lena, lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan turning in slow, tired circles. The scarf was draped across her chest like armor. Her eyes stung from the night before, though she hadn't cried as loudly as she wanted to. The walls felt too close, too alert, as if they might repeat whatever sounds she made. By morning, she had given up on sleep. She carried her notebook to the kitchen table, opened to a fresh page, and wrote with trembling hands, "Day 15. I am still waiting. But what if waiting is foolish?" The words looked strange on the paper, as though someone else had written them. She pressed the pencil harder, scratching the final letters until the lead broke. At school, Miss Farrell noticed her exhaustion. "Come here a moment, Lena," she said softly after class. Lena walked to the desk. "Did you eat breakfast?" the teacher asked. Lena nodded, though the truth was half a cup of tea and nothing more. "You look so tired. Is there anything you want to talk about?" Lena's lips parted, but she couldn't bring herself to speak. The words were heavy, unwilling to move past her throat. She shook her head quickly, eyes cast down. Miss Farrell sighed, touched her hand gently, and let her go. That afternoon, Lena sat again at the window. But this time, she didn't watch with the same eager determination. The hope inside her felt fractured. Each figure that walked past seemed to mock her patience. She whispered under her breath, "Why haven't you come back? Did I do something wrong?" The silence pressed down. She rose abruptly and went into her mother's room. Pulling open the dresser drawer, she found the comb again, strands of hair still tangled. She gripped it so tightly it dug into her palm. "You left everything here," she said aloud, her voice sharp. "If you meant to go forever, why leave these things behind?" Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She slammed the drawer shut and stumbled back. The scarf slipped from her shoulder and dropped to the floor. She stared at it, unwilling to pick it up. That night, the doubt that had been planted days ago grew roots. In her dream, she stood at the gate, waiting. A woman appeared down the street, walking fast. Lena's heart surged, until the woman came close and her face was blank, featureless. Lena screamed in the dream and woke with her hands pressed against her cheeks, damp with tears. Unable to calm herself, she pulled out her notebook and began writing furiously. "Dear Mama, why did you go? Why did you promise me evening if evening was a lie? I miss you so much I can't breathe. Everyone says you're not coming back. I still want to believe, but it hurts too much. If you loved me, why leave me like this?" She paused, her tears blurring the ink. She turned the page and kept writing. "Dear Mama, I want you here, but I also want the hurting to stop. I don't know which one I want more." When her hand finally slowed, she dropped the pencil and buried her face in the pages. The smell of paper mixed with salt. 2 days later, the neighbor's boy, the one who had once told her cruelly, "She's not coming back," approached the gate again. This time his expression was awkward, not smug. "I'm sorry," he said. "I shouldn't have said that." Lena glared at him through the bars. "Why did you?" He looked away. "I thought it was better to be honest. But maybe it wasn't my place." She wanted to scream again, but instead she said quietly, "You don't know anything." Then she closed the gate and walked back inside. That night, the rain returned, gentler this time. Lena pulled her blanket close but couldn't stop the tears. She whispered into the dark, "I can't do this anymore." For the first time, she did not sit at the window. She pulled the curtain closed and sat on the floor with her knees pulled to her chest. The familiar rhythm of waiting had been broken. The following morning, Miss Farrell visited again. She entered the kitchen and saw the untouched cup of tea across from Lena's seat. Her face grew troubled. "You're holding too much alone," she said. "I'm fine," Lena replied automatically. "No," the teacher said firmly. "You're not. And that's all right." The words cracked something inside her. Lena slammed her fists against the table. She promised she'd be back by evening. How can a promise just die? Her voice broke into sobs. "Why won't anyone tell me why?" Miss Farrell moved closer, kneeling so her eyes were level. "Because sometimes adults fail. And it's never a child's fault." Lena cried harder, her small body shaking. The teacher placed a hand on her back, steady and warm. For the first time since her mother's departure, Lena allowed herself to lean into someone else. When Miss Farrell left later that day, Lena returned to her notebook. She wrote in large, shaky letters, "Maybe she won't come back. But I'm still here." It was the first time she had written a sentence that admitted the possibility. The words scared her, yet they also held a strange power. That evening, she approached the window out of habit, but after a moment, she closed the curtain gently. She whispered, "Not tonight." The scarf still hung by the door, but she did not touch it. She left it there like a relic from a life that had ended. Instead, she pulled the teddy bear onto her lap and pressed her cheek to its worn head. "I'm still here," she murmured again. The clock in the hallway ticked on, steady and unbothered, but inside her something shifted. For the first time, she felt she had said the truth aloud, even if only to herself. And in that fragile truth, a crack of light appeared, thin, uncertain, but real. Spring unfolded quietly. The trees along the street sprouted fresh leaves, their green brighter than anything Lena had noticed in months. She still woke early, still carried her notebook to the table, but the ritual of pressing her face against a glass each evening had loosened its grip. The curtain often stayed half-drawn, and the window no longer dictated her every thought. One morning, Miss Farrell placed a small package in her hands at school. "For you," she said. Inside was a journal with a red cover, its pages blank and smooth. "Write what you can't say aloud," the teacher advised. "Sometimes paper can hold pain better than people." That night, Lena sat cross-legged on her bed and opened the new book. She didn't list days or tally evenings anymore. Instead, she wrote a letter. "Dear me, you are not broken. You are not to blame. You are still here, and that matters. Mama left, but that is not the end of your story. She paused, pencil trembling, then added, You are brave enough to begin again. For the first time, the words didn't feel like begging. They felt like planting. A week later, Lily, a girl from class who often worked quietly at the back, approached her. Do you want to sit together at lunch? She asked. Lena hesitated. She had grown used to solitude, to shrinking into corners. But something inside nudged her. Yes, she replied softly. They sat beneath the jacaranda tree. Purple petals drifted down, landing in Lily's hair. The two girls ate in silence at first, then Lily said, I don't live with my parents either. Lena turned to her quickly. You don't?
No.
They fight too much. I stay with my aunt. Lily shrugged, but her eyes betrayed the weight of it. It's not easy, but sometimes other people can care for you, too. Lena held her sandwich without tasting it. The admission felt like a door opening. I thought I was the only one. You're not, Lily said simply. The conversation was short, but it stitched something fragile between them. That evening, Lena recorded in her red notebook. I spoke to Lily. She understands in a way others don't. Maybe I don't have to be alone with this anymore. Days passed with subtle changes. Lena started helping her neighbor, Mrs. Patel, water the balcony plants. She accepted cookies from the shopkeeper when he offered them instead of shaking her head. She lingered after school to talk with Lily about homework or the latest book Miss Farrell recommended. Her mother's absence still ached, but the ache no longer filled every corner. It shared space now with small sparks of connection. One afternoon, Miss Farrell sat beside her in the empty classroom. You seem lighter lately, she observed. Lena tilted her head. Maybe. I still miss her. But I'm not waiting at the window every night anymore. That's a brave step, the teacher said. Is it brave to stop waiting? It's brave to keep living when waiting hurts too much. Lena absorbed the words. Brave was not how she had thought of herself, but perhaps bravery wasn't loud or dramatic. Perhaps it was as quiet as opening a notebook and telling the truth. At home, the scarf still hung near the door. She didn't remove it, but she no longer touched it each day. It had become part of the background, an artifact, not a command. One evening, instead of sitting at the window, she carried her notebook to the small garden behind the house. The soil smelled damp, and ants moved busily across the roots of the neem tree. She wrote while the last light faded. Dear Mama, I don't know why you left. Maybe I'll never know. I wanted to keep waiting, but I need to breathe again. If you come back one day, I will listen. But if you don't, I'll still go on. I'll carry what you gave me, the stories, the songs, and I'll make something new out of them. When she closed the notebook, she felt no collapse inside her chest. Only a steady calm. Weeks turned into a rhythm of school, garden, and letters. The whispers in the neighborhood softened. People stopped asking questions every time they saw her, as if they too sensed she was no longer living in constant suspense. One morning, she opened her notebook to find a page where she had scrawled, Maybe she won't come back. But I'm still here. She traced the words with her finger and realized they no longer frightened her. They grounded her. She added beneath them, I am enough. On a bright Saturday, Lily came over. The two of them sat on the floor of Lena's room, surrounded by scattered pencils and scraps of paper. Lily picked up the red notebook and asked, Can I read something? Lena hesitated, then nodded. Lily turned the pages carefully until she found the letter addressed to Dear Me. She read aloud in a steady voice, You are not broken. You are brave enough to begin again. When she finished, she looked up and smiled. That's beautiful. Lena felt her cheeks warm. It was hard to write. But you did, Lily said. She reached over and squeezed her hand. The gesture was small, yet it carried the weight of all the nights Lena had spent curled by the window. For the first time, she felt what her teacher had meant. Strength wasn't the absence of pain, it was the choice to keep opening doors. Later that evening, Lena pulled the curtain aside and looked out at the street. Children played with a ball that bounced too high, laughter scattering into the air. The dog by the postbox chased after them, tail wagging. She watched for a while, but not with the restless hunger of before. She wasn't waiting for a figure to appear. She was simply observing life unfold. She whispered to herself, "I'm still here. And I'll keep going." The words didn't feel like a plea anymore. They sounded like a promise. She closed the curtain, placed her notebook on the bedside table, and hugged the bear once before setting it neatly at the pillow's edge. The scarf hung quietly by the door, neither comfort nor curse, just a piece of fabric. She let it be. That night, she slept without tears. Dreams came, but they were softer. Fields of green, laughter with Lily, the rustle of pages turning. And when she woke the next morning to sunlight pooling across the floor, she smiled faintly. The waiting had ended. Something else had begun. Her story was not about absence anymore. It was about discovery, of voice, of courage, of the self that had been hidden beneath grief. For the first time, Lena didn't wonder if her mother would return. She wondered what she herself might become.